Shattered Silence, A Journey of Survival and Healing, by Nanice Munoz, formerly Nicola Nooks. Chapter 10. Disconnecting from Family, The Breaking Point. The fear and uncertainty felt as if the ground beneath me had vanished, leaving me suspended in a void. One moment, I was just another person trying to carve out a path in the world, and the next, I was gripped by the unrelenting fear of being discovered. My immigration status had expired, and though it wasn't something I had chosen or intended, I found myself caught in a precarious, powerless situation. The realization hit me hard like a crashing wave pulling me under, choking my thoughts and leaving me gasping for air. Fear became my constant companion. It was as though the very air I breathed was heavy with anxiety, amplified by the administration's harsh stance on immigration and the unyielding enforcement of its laws. The presence of police officers loomed over my life like a shadow I could never escape. Walking down the street became an act of courage, one fraught with the terrifying possibility that any officer might stop me, demand to see my papers, and end my fragile existence in this new world. Uniforms became symbols of my fear, so overwhelming it blurred reason. It didn't matter whether they belonged to police officers, security guards, or strangers in official attire. The mere sight of a uniform tightened the knot of anxiety in my chest. In those moments, my fear was all-consuming, and there was no space for anything else. The weight of uncertainty. The weight of uncertainty loomed over me like a persistent shadow, a constant reminder of how quickly my life could unravel. It wasn't just the looming expiration of my legal status that consumed me. I was also fighting an invisible battle, one I couldn't fully articulate at the time. I was caught in a spiritual warfare that drained my energy, left me confused, and made me desperate for peace. These attacks weren't just external, they were internal, intangible forces working against me. Though I couldn't explain these struggles fully to anyone, I confided in a few trusted individuals in the United States, hoping for understanding and comfort. Some people may have thought I was paranoid, unable to comprehend the intensity of my experience. To me, the attacks were vivid, tangible, and unrelenting, far too real to be dismissed as imagination. From time to time, I received prophecies that accurately confirmed what I was going through, and even years later, I received a prophetic word that affirmed what I had gone through. The prophet revealed that those spiritual attacks were real. They weren't just a trick of my mind, but genuine forces at play. This revelation validated my experiences, proving to me that my struggles weren't imagined. Yet, without the language or support to fully explain what I was going through, I often felt alone in it. That loneliness drove me deeper into myself, seeking solace in solitude, the only place I felt safe. The isolation became both a comfort and a curse. I had always valued quiet moments, but now the desire to disconnect became overwhelming. The stress, fear, and emotional chaos in my life formed the perfect storm. I stopped trusting others to understand what I was going through. Even the people I had once confided in, family and friends, seemed distant, like strangers. I couldn't bring myself to share the depths of my struggle, fearing that they wouldn't fully understand, especially since spiritual attacks can't be seen or proven in the physical realm. So, I withdrew further into the shadows, choosing to carry my burdens alone rather than add weight to others, and also removing myself from the public eye, and from those who were secretly attacking me. Eventually, I decided to sever ties entirely. I changed my phone number, cutting off communication. Then, I blocked all my family members on Facebook, creating a digital wall between me and the outside world. I informed a few of them about this decision, letting them know they could still contact me through other means if necessary. But one family member's reaction stood out. She was visibly upset, and I couldn't understand why at the time. It wasn't until years later that I would come to recognize the spiritual significance of her response. Later, I deactivated my Facebook account altogether. It felt like the only way to escape the chaos and regain a sense of peace. I didn't know how long the silence would last, but in that moment, it was my only option. Disconnecting became my defense mechanism, a way to protect myself from a world that felt overwhelming and out of control. Yet deep down, I knew this silence wasn't sustainable. True peace would only come when I confronted the very world I had chosen to shut out. The decision to disconnect. The decision to sever ties was not one I made lightly. As the weight of uncertainty pressed down on me, I yearned for peace, something that felt increasingly impossible to achieve while staying connected to the chaos of my family life. The spiritual attacks I endured added an unseen layer of stress that compounded my fears about my undocumented status. It felt like I was waging battles on multiple fronts: physical, emotional, and spiritual, and the noise of daily interactions only magnified the turmoil within me. Disconnecting seemed like my only way to regain control and protect the fragile sense of peace I was clinging to. Taking action required a level of determination I didn't realize I had. Changing my phone number was my first step. It was a decisive move to create space and reduce the flood of communication that had become too overwhelming. Blocking my family on Facebook wasn't driven by anger or resentment, but by self-preservation. I needed a space to think clearly, to breathe, free from the expectations, questions, or judgments that often accompanied my interactions. Eventually, I cut off all remaining digital ties, closing the door completely on anyone who might try to reach me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I had taken control of my own narrative. I created the distance I needed, giving myself room to reflect, heal, and regain perspective. Yet even as I made these decisions, I couldn't silence the inner conflict they brought. A part of me wondered if this disconnection could be seen as betrayal. Was I abandoning my family when I should have been standing firm? Or was this necessary for my survival, a chance to rebuild myself without interference? Deep down, I knew the answer. This wasn't about them. It was about me. I had spent years trying to bridge gaps, trying to hold things together for everyone else, all the while neglecting my own well-being. The choice to step back, though deeply painful, was an act of self-care. It was an acknowledgement that my spirit needed protection, even if others didn't understand. The spiritual attacks I faced were an entirely different battle. They left me questioning my every move. Was this disconnection truly helping me, or was it making me more vulnerable to the very forces I was trying to escape? Every step I took toward solitude felt like both a relief and a burden. The silence I created allowed me to hear my own thoughts clearly for the first time in years. I could pray, reflect, and seek God's direction without the distraction of outside opinions. But this silence also carried a weight of its own, a gnawing question of whether I had gone too far. Would I ever find the strength to reconnect? Or had I cut myself off so completely that there was no way back? During this time, my faith became my anchor. I reflected often, turning to God for clarity and reassurance. I wanted to believe that my actions weren't selfish, that they were necessary for my survival. The spiritual attacks I faced felt like a storm no one else could see, and I realized that no one could fight these battles for me. Even when my choices hurt others or caused disappointment, I reminded myself that healing sometimes requires stepping back, even from the people we love most. Though the disconnection was painful, it gave me moments of solace, an inner quiet I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I could listen to my own needs without guilt. The solace and silence in the silence I created. I found myself navigating a delicate balance between solitude and isolation. At first, the quiet felt heavy, almost suffocating. I was surrounded by uncertainty, fear, and the weight of unanswered questions about my future. Yet, as I settled into this space, I realized that silence could also be a gift, a sanctuary where I could truly hear myself think, and more importantly, where I could hear God's voice. During this time, I leaned into my faith in a way I never had before. With everything else stripped away, I saw the disconnection not as a loss, but as an opportunity to grow closer to God. I used the quiet to seek Him with intensity, dedicating hours to prayer and preaching His word. Even though my circumstances hadn't changed, my perspective began to shift. I started to see the silence as a tool for refinement, a time when I was being molded and prepared for what lay ahead. Although I had disconnected from my family, God ensured I wasn't entirely alone. He sent people into my life who offered help and comfort in ways I hadn't expected. Among them was a pastor in Texas who stepped in during a particularly challenging time. His kindness and guidance reminded me that God's provision often comes through His people. There were moments when the weight of my circumstances felt unbearable, but God always provided exactly what I needed. Whether it was through a kind word, practical help, or a simple gesture of support, I felt His presence working through others. These encounters were like rays of light breaking through a stormy sky, affirming that I wasn't abandoned. In the stillness of those quiet moments, I experienced a peace that only God could provide. My struggles didn't vanish, but I felt His presence in a way that was undeniable. My prayers became intimate conversations, my worship became a lifeline, and my trust in Him deepened with every passing day. In the absence of other voices, His voice grew clearer, guiding me through the uncertainty and giving me strength when I felt weak. Of course, moments of doubt and emotional strain still arose. Isolation has a way of amplifying fears, and there were times when I questioned whether I had made the right choices. But whenever those doubts crept in, I turned to the Word of God for reassurance. Scriptures like Isaiah 41 verse 10, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God," became my anchors. Even when I didn't fully grasp it in the moment, those words were a quiet source of strength, reminding me that I was never truly alone. This period of disconnection wasn't without its challenges, but it became a season of profound growth. The silence gave me the space to confront emotions I had long ignored, to seek clarity about what truly mattered, and to draw strength from my relationship with God. While the path ahead remained uncertain, I emerged with a renewed sense of purpose and an unshakable faith that He was in control. The struggles and growth, the time of disconnection, though fraught with challenges, became an unexpected opportunity for profound personal growth. In the solitude, I found the space to reflect, not just on the circumstances that had brought me to this point, but on the person I was becoming. Both emotionally and spiritually, I grew in ways that might not have been possible without the stillness this season of my life demanded. One of the most significant realizations during this period was the importance of letting go. Not in terms of forgiveness. I had already forgiven my family long ago. I knew my ultimate goal was to enter heaven, and holding on to unforgiveness was not an option if I hoped to get there. Yet, even though I had forgiven them, the pain from past experiences still lingered at times. It wasn't bitterness or resentment. It was the natural ache left by wounds that heal but leave behind scars. Part of my journey became learning to carry those scars without letting them define me. Conversations with others added another layer of complexity. People would often ask, "How is your family back in Jamaica?" A simple question, but it always caused me to pause internally. I wasn't in contact with them, but I couldn't bring myself to say that aloud. So I would smile and respond, "They should be fine," even though fine was a word I chose more for their comfort than for the truth of my situation. Even the pastor in Texas, who had been such a blessing in my life, would ask about my family. And every time my answer was the same. I believe they are okay. Over time, I realized this habit of protecting the truth of my situation was a quiet strength. It wasn't about dishonesty. It was about preserving my dignity and guarding my privacy as I navigated a complicated and deeply personal season of life. I came to understand that not everyone needed to know the full extent of my struggles. Shielding myself from unnecessary scrutiny, judgment, or pity became an act of self-preservation, allowing me to focus on healing and growth without the weight of others' opinions. As I pressed deeper into my faith, I found that this time of solitude was shaping my perspective for the future. I began to embrace the truth that my value was not tied to my circumstances, nor was it defined by my family relationships. My worth was rooted in God's love for me and in His plans for my life. This revelation became a cornerstone of my growth, teaching me that even painful seasons serve a purpose. The quiet before the storm. As the days turned into weeks and then months, I found myself standing at a crossroads. The disconnection had, in many ways, been necessary. It was a retreat into myself, a quiet period to gather the broken pieces of my spirit. Yet the quiet was never meant to be permanent. It was the stillness before something greater, before the storm of reconciliation that was yet to come. In my isolation, I learned the duality of silence, its ability to both heal and wound, to create space for reflection while amplifying the ache of unresolved emotions. I had intentionally stepped back from my family and the world in search of peace. I thought solitude would give me the clarity I desperately sought, and in some ways it did. But I also came to understand that solitude had its limits. It couldn't give me closure or heal the relationships that, despite all my efforts, still weighed on my heart. I'd hoped that disconnecting would ease my pain, but as I sat in that silence, the weight of what was left unsaid and undone began to surface. The relationships I had tried to protect by withdrawing lingered in my heart, unresolved, waiting for a reckoning. The lesson I learned during that time was profound. Sometimes, to move forward, you have to step back. You have to give yourself the space to heal, to understand, and to grow. It wasn't an easy lesson. The fear of losing connection, of being misunderstood, hung heavily over me. But I began to see that healing didn't always look or feel like peace. Sometimes it looked like tension, discomfort, and struggle. It was in that struggle that I found resilience, a deeper understanding of myself, and the courage to continue forgiving. I didn't just forgive my family for the wounds of the past. I also forgave myself. I forgave myself for not knowing how to navigate the complexities of those relationships sooner. Forgiveness became an ongoing process, one that required grace, not just for others but for myself as well. During this time of quiet, a beautiful and unexpected chapter began to unfold in my life. It was then that I met my husband. Amid the silence, when I least expected it, I found someone who would become my partner, my strength, and my support. My heart, heavy with the burdens of the past, began to open again. The love we shared was a reminder of the beauty that could bloom even in the midst of uncertainty. Our connection brought healing in ways I hadn't imagined, offering the companionship and stability I had lacked during my season of isolation. We got married, and in that union, I discovered a new sense of peace and purpose. Even in my solitude, I was never truly alone. There were moments when God's presence felt so tangible. It was as if the fear and confusion I carried began to dissolve. In the stillness, I could hear his voice whispering within me, guiding me, preparing me for what lay ahead. That small voice reminded me that it wasn't time to sever ties for good. Reconciliation, though complicated and uncertain, was still a possibility. Now, as I reflect on those months of withdrawal, I see them not as a setback, but as a step forward, a necessary step. That season of silence forced me to confront what I had been running from, what I had been avoiding. And with that confrontation came a choice to stop hiding, to open the door again, and to face whatever was on the other side. I wasn't sure what that open door would lead to, but I knew it was time to take the first step. The stage had been set, and reconciliation was on the horizon. The quiet was nearly over. And though I didn't know what would happen next, I knew I was ready to face the unresolved, to embrace the discomfort of healing, and to move forward with a deeper understanding of myself, my family, and the lessons God had been teaching me all along. That concludes Chapter 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for Chapter 11 in the next video.